Hello, I'm Owen Ezell. I'm here today with Barbara L'Italian of the Massachusetts Senate. Senator L'Italian represents the 2nd Essex and Middlesex District. Senator, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
I'd first like to talk about the governor. Charlie Baker has an approval rating of over 70%, the highest of any governor in the nation. How do you feel about him and his administration?
Well, he won by a very slight margin 2 years ago in a very tight race. I'm of the opinion that we want him to succeed because if he succeeds, Massachusetts succeeds.
Can you sort of outline some things that you like about his administration, like that he's done?
I think that he is a guy that likes to get into the weeds. I think he, having served before under Governor Cellucci, understands the mechanics of government. He's sort of a technician. I worked with him. I chair the municipalities committee and worked with him on a major rewrite to bring local government into the 21st century, sort of ways in which to make ways in which to make like your town manager and your board of selectmen's job easier. So ways in which we can allow them to make decisions on sort of the small things at the local level rather than having to come up and go before my committee on a hearing on a what's called a home rule petition, which is something that would be voted on at town meeting. And there were a lot of things where they couldn't really move and make critical decisions and even purchases without coming before my committee. So we made it easier for them to make a lot more of those sort of day-to-day decisions so that they can focus on some of the bigger issues that are in each community.
I see. And can you just outline some things that you dislike about that he's done in the past couple of years? Are there any
I'm troubled by this move for privatization that's happened within the MBTA. I think he took capitalized on the winter crisis when we had record-setting snow and used it as a reason to privatize. In my opinion, privatization doesn't save money. Because you then are subbing out to a private entity that is responsible to a board of directors and has to make money.
Right.
And so the only way you cut corners on that is you either cut the staff salaries or you have fewer employees. So I am not a big fan of the MBTA piece. The other piece I'm concerned about is that there's been a process for budget that's gone on forever, and the governor has found a way to sort of control that piece by not releasing funds that have been agreed to in the budgetary process, including money that would benefit Andover right now. $100,000 for the historic mill district that was agreed to in the budget. He did veto it, but the legislature overrode that, and I believe that those monies ought to come back to the community.
Let's talk some more about privatization. I know you're pretty passionate about education, and recently you're in a roundtable discussion actually here about charter schools.
Right.
Can you just talk more about your response to the no vote on question 2?
Yeah, I really embrace the no on 2 question. I've served here on the Andover School Committee as well as a state rep and a state senator. I've been looking at this issue for over 14 years. And in my opinion, we should be looking to raise up funding, resources, support for all students, not just the 4% that are headed to charter schools. A lot is made of wait lists. Well, there are wait lists for vocational schools. There are wait lists for innovation schools. Again, I think that what I've seen over the last couple of years that's incredibly troubling is this notion of Wall Street money coming in, millions and millions of dollars spent on this ad campaign for the charter school thing. And 3 of my colleagues saw a total of $200,000 embedded into their campaigns by their opponents, which was Wall Street money because of where they stood on the charter school. I think we have to, we've done the work. We know where we need to fund our schools. We now need to make that commitment and place that funding in every public school. And if a public school is faltering in the inner city or elsewhere, we need to focus on helping them, not setting up a separate parallel system, which I think Brown versus Board of Education determined years ago is really is unequal and is discriminatory.
What do you think the motivation is for Wall Street to be putting money into Vote Yes on Question 2 campaign?
Well, all of the charter schools are supposed to be nonprofit. However, you see these large corporations that are coming up with sort of plug-and-play curriculum.
Yeah.
And, there's money to be made here, or else people wouldn't be pushing this to the degree that they have. Interestingly enough, back in 1991, when ed reform happened, charter schools were seen as a compromise versus having vouchers put into the schools. Back then, a lot of very well-intentioned, well-meaning public school teachers did go off and start some charter schools. In fact, we have an excellent charter school in Lawrence, Community Day Charter. The people that started that school are still there 30 years later, very much committed to excellence, and the students there perform quite well. However, if you take a step back and look statewide, a lot of the schools that are coming in now are, again, these entities coming from outside of the state who may or may not be committed to the particular students in that given community. A lot of the charter schools have very punitive behavior codes, which force a lot of kids with special needs back into the public school system. So, I think that again, we need to focus on educating 100% of our students, not 4%.
Yeah. Massachusetts is widely regarded as having the best public education systems in the nation, based on testing metrics and stuff. Why do you think that is, and what can we do to kind of preserve it for the future?
I'm not a huge fan of high stakes testing, so I understand that that's the benchmark, is the testing. I think that to continue to lead the nation, we are going to have to make the adjustment to sort of what you're doing right now, which is project learning, right? Project-based learning. I think there's so much that kids can learn by collaborating, working in small groups, understanding the give and take that's involved, because that's what the workplace is going to look like. I think we need to begin to move away from sort of the rote learning, test taking, reading information and then spitting it back out. I think you need to understand how to apply things, how to infer. So those are the kind of things that I think, in order to stay creative and keep pace in the 21st century, that's where Massachusetts needs to pivot to. Some communities are already doing that and doing a great job of it. Others really need to catch up.
I'd like to take a minute to talk about this year's federal election. What are your thoughts about President-elect Donald Trump?
My initial thought is that I was absolutely shocked that he was elected president. I was on the ballot that same day, and so it was real mixed emotion because I won overwhelmingly. It took me a long time to kind of process that he was truly going to be the leader of the free world. And I'm still I know many people have worked through the 5 stages of grief. I guess I'm still sort of in shock. It's taken, many people have evolved to anger and resolution, whatever. As I see the different folks that are being named to the cabinet, again, I'm just aghast. To me, it's like the D list of national players that are being named to this list. So. Again, though, I suppose we need to hope that he succeeds because our country really needs to succeed.
Are there any cabinet picks that you are kind of especially worried about?
Well, the head of education, being someone who embraces conversion therapy for gay and lesbian kids, really frightens me. I'm really worried that the pendulum is going to swing and they're going to spend the next 4 years rolling back all the good that President Obama has done. And then I believe if they do that, not the least of which will be healthcare, if they do that, I think we may very well see yet another reactionary presidential vote where the pendulum comes back in the other direction again. That's my guess. Can you provide any insight about why he won? Do you have any, your experience on the campaign trail? Why was this year right for Donald Trump and not for Hillary Clinton? I think that in some ways Bernie Sanders set the table with a populist message about those who've kind of been left behind. And I think that, Donald Trump, through his many really questionable manners in which he brought people in. The fact remains that regardless of how incendiary he was, there were people that believed that he was going to not leave them behind.
Yeah.
And so sort of folks from the Rust Belt, the industrial areas, folks who really haven't been part of the high-tech and 21st century economy, I think are those folks that felt highly motivated. I think there were people that were embarrassed to admit that they were going to vote for him.
And that's why
therefore the polls were really skewed.
Yeah.
And I also think there was, lower than expected turnout among minorities. And I think, let's face it, if the vote had been just millennials,
Yeah.
we would have President Clinton.
Right.
So there's a real schism in this country that's got to be addressed and really brought back together.
Do you think that the Democrats have kind of lost their ability to speak to, as you put it, those who have been left behind?
I think we need to do a better job. I mean, let's not forget that President Clinton won the popular vote by over 2 million votes.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting my email box flooded now with requests to move to national popular vote. And in fact, the Massachusetts Senate has written a resolution and will be sending that in to Congress because it's the second time in 15 years this has happened.
Yeah.
I think that we need to do a better job of embracing, again, folks for whom the skilled jobs and the factory jobs have left behind. I just think it's ironic that President Trump, who has come in to save half of the 2,000 votes in Indiana, he was having his ties manufactured outside in China.
Right.
So let's see if this is for real or if this is a check-the-box exercise of trying to make people happy. But I do think that we need to come back to doing more manufacturing in our country. A lot of those jobs have been lost due to innovation, and that's not going to come back. But I think that if we can set up a structure whereby businesses aren't rewarded for taking their work off country, off site, I think that will be a very good thing.
What tone does the Democratic Party need to adopt in the next 4 years if they want to win back the White House?
I mean, I think their tone was fine.
Yeah.
I just think that...
Or what about their message?
Yeah, I think the message, again, I think they tried to be an inclusionary message. I think they tried to talk about the everyday person. They're obviously going to have to refine that because there are many working class folks that felt that they weren't being brought in by that piece.
Yeah.
Specifically, it seems that one of the touch points were, the free trade agreements.
Right.
Among others. I think you're going to see Elizabeth Warren probably rise to the top over the next couple of years. I think, we'll see where Bernie Sanders is as a player in all of this. They were positioning themselves to sort of guide had Hillary Clinton won, to guide, her policies off of the center and more left of center. So it will be fascinating to watch politically to see what sort of opposition, loyal opposition, arises in the next couple of years. The barometer will be in 2 years when we have our off-year elections, and that's when you'll see what happens nationally with state house elections and congressional and Senate elections as well. And typically, in the mid-year election after a president is elected, they tend to go to the opposite, the party not in charge.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you just briefly talk about? I think we only have a couple of seconds left, but about the kind of the red wave in the Congress as well. The Republicans won the Senate.
Yeah, a lot. I can't speak to what happened in the Senate. In the state houses and in the congressional seats, I will say that whoever has control of the legislatures, the state legislatures, 2 years prior to redistricting, really has the opportunity to determine the balance in their states and in Congress, because they get to draw the lines however they see fit. So that will be an interesting thing to watch again. So 2 years from now, whoever takes control in those off-year or mid-year elections, we'll really have the opportunity to redraw those lines in all 50 states to determine where we go once the census information comes in.
Okay. I think that's all we have time for. Senator, thank you for doing this interview today.
Oh, my pleasure.
We appreciate that you took time out of your schedule to come down here. I'm your host, Owen Ezell. Thanks for watching.